Your mom's no Navy SEAL. That's what they said to her. Loud, cruel, right there in the middle of the lunchroom. 12-year-old Emma had only told the truth. My mom's in the Navy Special Operations. And for that, they called her a liar, laughed in her face, dumped her backpack across the ground and kicked her, drawing like it was trash. The teachers didn't believe her. The parents mocked her. The students filmed her. They all thought she'd made it up. That no woman, no mother could possibly hold that title. What they didn't know was that her mother was already on her way, and she wasn't coming alone. Before we show you what happened when 3 SUVs rolled into that school parking lot, drop a comment telling us where in the world you're watching from, hit like, subscribe, and tap the bell icon, because this was never just a rumor. The cafeteria at Oakwood Middle School was a jungle of noise by 12:26 p.m. Forks clinked against plastic trays, juice boxes hissed open, and the PA system crackled out half-audible reminders about next week's science fair. Students squeezed into lunch tables in their usual clusters. Athletes, band kids, the Roblox crowd, the too cool to eat girls huddled near the vending machines. No one noticed the small girl in the corner booth. Emma Jenkins, 12, sat alone, her lunch tray untouched. A crustless sandwich, a bruised apple, and a chocolate milk carton sat quietly beside her math binder. She wasn't hungry. Her eyes kept flicking toward the cafeteria door. Her mom was supposed to pick her up early today. Dentist appointment. Third time they had rescheduled it. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and sat straighter when she spotted familiar faces approaching. Ethan Miller, all bluster and oversized sneakers, flopped onto the bench across from her. Madison Parker and Jaden Harris slid in beside him, chattering mid-con conversation. My dad's deploying again, Madison said. He's Army Ranger. Third tour. Jaden beamed. My mom got promoted. She's Space Force now. Ethan flexed his scrawny arms. My uncle's a Marine sniper. He taught me how to shoot a BB gun. Emma hesitated, then said, without looking up, my mom's Navy Special Operations. The table went still. Ethan squinted at her. Wait, like Navy? Navy? Emma nodded. Once. See? Jaden blinked. Like your mom? Yeah, Emma said simply, a beat. Then Ethan's face twisted into a grin. Girls, stop lying. Ain't no female SEALs. Madison laughed. What, does she parachute into your school place too? Emma's face didn't change. She just doesn't talk about it much. Jaden grabbed her phone. I'm texting Tyler. She's gonna freak when she hears this. The noise around them shifted. Ethan stood cupping his hands like a megaphone. Hey yo, y'all hear this? Emma says her mom's a Navy SEAL. Heads turned. A few students snorted. Cluster of boys at the next table howled with laughter. One kid pointed his phone at her, already recording. Emma flinched slightly, eyes lowering. She said nothing. Ethan laughed louder. What next, Emma? Your mom's got a submarine parked out back. Someone shouted from across the room. Take it back, liar. The lunchroom aide looked up from her crossword, frowned vaguely at the commotion, then looked back down. Knock it off, she muttered, half-heartedly. Emma tried to gather her things. She wanted to leave, to vanish, to explain, without sounding like she was proving something that never needed proving. She really is, she said quietly. I'm not lying. Ethan stepped closer to her. Table. Your mom's no Navy SEAL, he shouted, grinning at the crowd. Quit lying, Emma. That one hit. The cafeteria burst into noise again. Taunts, laughter, clapping like it was a performance. Emma's fingers tightened around her lunch tray. Her cheeks were burning. Her throat hurt, but her voice didn't shake. She only whispered to no one in particular. She is. What she didn't know, what none of them saw yet, was that the moment was being filmed. Student halfway down the table had caught the whole exchange, and that video would be forwarded to 6 different group chats and 1 PDA thread before the final bell rang. The final bell rang at 3:18 p.m. The halls of Oakwood Middle swelled like a pressure valve released. Backpacks slammed shut. Lockers clanged. Sneakers slapped linoleum. Students poured out onto the sidewalk, scattering in clusters toward buses and carpool lanes. Emma walked alone. Her backpack was zipped tight against her spine, arms looped through both straps like they might hold her upright. She moved quietly, head down, the noise of the crowd passing over her like wind. At the far edge of the pickup circle, she found her usual spot near the red-painted curb. She checked the time on her scholarship tablet. 3:21. Her mom was late, but not unusually so. Then she heard her name. Hey, SEAL girl. Emma turned slowly. Ethan, flanked by 2 boys from gym class, stepped off the grass beside the bike rack and blocked blocked her path. Behind them, Madison and Jaden trailed, arms crossed, grinning like they'd come to watch a show. Still, telling people that Navy SEAL lie? Ethan asked too loudly. I didn't lie, Emma said quietly. You made everyone look stupid, Madison said. Even the teachers don't believe you. Emma tried to sidestep, but the boys moved with her. She gripped her backpack straps tighter. I don't want to talk to you. Oh, we know. Ethan smirked. You just want to live your secret SEAL fantasy. Yanked at her backpack. Not hard, just enough to break her grip. Before she could react, Madison grabbed it from behind, unclipping the top flap and dumping it onto the sidewalk. Paper scattered. A binder cracked open. Among the mess, a hand-drawn picture on lined paper. Emma and her mom both in camel. Side by side under the words, My hero. Ethan picked it up and held it up for the others. Ah, look at this, he jeered. Is this your imaginary SEAL, Mom? Bet. She fights ninjas on weekends. He tore the top corner as he waved it, then flicked it into the air like a napkin. Emma dropped to her knees instantly, grabbing the paper as it drifted down. Don't touch my stuff, she said through her teeth. Ethan stepped forward and pushed her shoulder. Not enough to knock her over, but enough to humiliate you. Don't get to pretend just 'cause your mom doesn't come to PDA meetings, he snapped. Emma clutched the crumpled drawing to her chest. Her eyes burned, but she wouldn't cry. Not here. She gathered her other pages, ignoring the smirks. When she reached for her notebook, Ethan kicked it across the pavement. The cover tore on the edge of the curb. Oops, he said flatly. Emma's voice cracked, barely a whisper. She is a SEAL. Jaden rolled her eyes. Then, where is she? Huh? Ethan raised his phone. Again. Screen already recording. Let's ask TikTok. Emma the Liar episode 2. She didn't move, just stared at the pavement, and then everything changed. Subtle silence spread across the group. No alarm, no announcement, just the sound of footsteps, slow, deliberate, gravel crunching under boots. The group turned instinctively because someone was coming, and whatever this moment was about to become, it no longer belonged to them. A matte black SUV slipped into the car line like a shadow, cutting through the sunlight. Didn't rev, didn't honk, didn't demand tension. Yet every kid within sight felt something shift when it rolled to a stop. The passenger door cracked open, and Lieutenant Commander Sarah Jenkins stepped out. No uniform, no rank, no insignia to broadcast who she was, just a fitted black tactical hoodie worn, running shoes, and a low ponytail that still held the faint dryness of a morning spent on the training range. Her eyes swept once across the pickup zone, quiet, sharp, assessing threat vectors, the way other parents scanned for their car. Then she saw her daughter Emma, kneeling on the pavement, backpack emptied, hair in her face, one hand clutching a ripped drawing while students circled like spectators. Sarah didn't blink. She didn't ask permission. She didn't ask for an explanation. She walked not quickly because speed suggested panic, not slowly because hesitation suggested doubt, just steady, centered steps that made the kids instinctively part around her. She reached Emma's side and knelt down, one palm landing gently on her daughter's shoulder. Hey, she said quietly. Emma looked up, cheeks flushed from holding back tears. Mom, they said I lied about you. Sarah's expression didn't crack. She tipped Emma's chin just enough to check her face, then shifted her gaze down to the scattered pages, the torn notebook, the dirt smeared across Emma's knees. Are you hurt? She asked. Emma shook her head, just embarrassed. Sarah nodded. Once an acknowledgement, not acceptance. Then she stood, her shadow stretched across the pavement as she turned toward the group. Ethan lowered his phone as if someone had unplugged his arm. Madison and Jaden backed up a half step, suddenly unsure of their lines now that a new presence had entered the scene. Sarah's voice was quiet, too quiet for someone about to confront a crowd. Who dumped her backpack? Silence. Her eyes moved to the torn notebook. Who kicked that? More silence. Students shifted, looking to one another, like they hoped someone else would answer. Her gaze hardened. Not angry, not emotional, just focused. Which of you put hands on my daughter? Ethan's throat bobbed. He took one instinctive step backward. His friends followed without thinking. Sarah didn't move toward them. She didn't have to. The stillness in her stance was worse than shouting, worse than threats, because quiet confidence, the kind honed from years in places these kids didn't know existed, was something they'd never seen before. A few students glanced toward the school doors, expecting a teacher, a hall monitor, someone, anyone, to intervene, but no adults came. It was just Sarah, Emma, and the kids who'd gathered for entertainment but suddenly wished wished they'd stayed out of it. Sarah's voice dropped even lower. I'll ask again. Who touched my daughter? No one answered, but she had already learned everything she needed to know. The tension hadn't even settled before it was challenged. From the edge of the parking lot, Staff Sergeant Thomas Hall came striding in, like he'd heard just enough to assume the rest. His rigid gait announced authority before he even opened his mouth. Behind him followed two other PDA parents, both prior service, both known for throwing their weight around during school meetings, and none of them liked what they were seeing. A woman standing firm while their children shrank. "Ma'am," Hall called, stepping between Sarah and the still huddled group of students. "You need to calm down. They're just kids." Sarah didn't flinch. "They put hands on my child." One of the other fathers, Mr. Bridger, former Army, all bark, no insight, added, "It was teasing, nothing physical." Sarah kept her voice low. "My daughter's backpack was emptied, her drawing ripped, her notebook kicked. That's not teasing. You should have come to staff," Bridger argued. Sarah turned her head slightly, her gaze never wavering. "And if I had, would they have believed her, or would they have forwarded another video around the PDA thread?" That landed. Hall shifted his weight. His voice dropped lower. "Look, if your kid's gonna make up stories about being a SEAL's daughter, people are going to call it out." Sarah blinked slowly. "You think she made it up?" Hall shrugged. "It's not just me. No one's heard of any female SEALs around here. Maybe your wife's Navy. Logistics, that happens." Sarah took one step forward. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't adjust her stance. She simply said, "Staff Sergeant Hall, stand down." Hall's brow twitched. "Excuse me, you're escalating a situation. You don't understand. I'm protecting the kids you're scaring." Sarah tilted her head, her tone still even. "I didn't scare them. They're afraid because they recognize what just walked in." Bridger laughed dismissively. "What are you supposed to be then, FBI contractor? Don't owe you a resume." Hall's face tightened. "Lady, you don't get to give me orders." Sarah didn't move. "I outrank you." He blinked, momentarily caught off guard by the certainty in her voice. "Yeah, you," he scoffed. "Don't make me laugh." She didn't respond with words, only silence, that unblinking, leveled silence that didn't need to explain itself. Then Hall reached out, not with violence, not even aggression, just a reflexive, dismissive gesture, his hand brushing toward her upper arm like he was hurting someone who didn't belong. It was a mistake because Sarah Jenkins didn't belong to anyone, and in that instant the rules changed. The moment Staff Sergeant Hall's fingers grazed the sleeve of her hoodie, Sarah moved with no warning, no build-up, and no more force than gravity allowed. One pivot, her left foot rotated behind his heel, her right hand captured his wrist, and then, just like that, his own momentum did the rest. Hall's knees buckled as his center of gravity shifted forward. He stumbled sideways, unable to stop the slide. His hip clipped the fender of a park sedan with a sharp metallic thud, and he crumpled halfway to the pavement before catching himself on a bumper. The parking lot went dead silent. No shouting, no yelping, no chaos, just a crowd of stunned faces staring at a seasoned Marine veteran, now red-faced and off-balance, looking up at a woman who hadn't even broken her posture. Sarah let go of his wrist the moment he hit the car. Her hands were down, open, relaxed. She didn't follow up, didn't press. She just looked at him. "Do not," she said quietly, "put your hands on me again." Hall stood upright slowly, chest heaving, not from injury but from the humiliation of realizing how little he'd understood the situation he'd just walked into. The second PDA father, Bridger, stepped forward now, eyes wide with disbelief and brewing rage. "That was assault." Sarah raised one palm. She didn't raise it like a stop sign. She didn't threaten. She simply extended it. Vertical, still absolute. "Think very carefully," she said before taking another step. Bridger didn't. He froze mid-stride because something in her voice didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like a final option she didn't want to use. And even if he didn't fully believe what she was claiming to be, his instincts believed her body language. Behind them, the crowd of students had fallen into stunned silence. Phones that had once recorded were now lowered. Emma, still kneeling beside her spilled backpack, didn't blink. Ethan had taken 3 steps back and now stood just behind Bridger, shoulders tense, phone shaking in his hand. Even Madison and Jaden had stopped whispering. Sarah scanned the group once more, not to intimidate but to observe, to assess. No one dared speak. Hall rubbed his wrist where her fingers had guided him. Off balance. It wasn't injured, just humbled. "What the hell kind of mom are you?" he muttered. muttered. Sarah didn't answer. She didn't need to because she was about to tell them exactly who she was. Staff Sergeant Hall straightened, his voice catching up with his bruised pride. Who the hell do you think you are? He spat, rubbing his hip like it might give him leverage. Sarah turned toward him, not with rage, not with ego, but with the calm of someone who didn't need to explain herself yet chose to do so anyway, not for him but for her daughter. She spoke without theatrics, each word flat and deliberate. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Jenkins, United States Navy SEAL, Naval Special Warfare Development Group, 22 years active. She let it sit, didn't follow it with a smirk, didn't add a line about maybe now you'll listen, just gave them the truth, clean, undeniable. A wave of stillness passed over the circle. The laughter that had echoed in this same space hours ago felt like it had never existed. Mr. Bridger's mouth opened, then shut. Ethan blinked and slowly lowered his phone to his side. His thumb hovered over the record button, but no one was looking at him anymore. The teacher monitoring carpool, Miss Fraser, stood frozen at the entrance with her clipboard clutched to her chest like a riot shield. She had witnessed the tail end of it enough to understand what she'd missed earlier. Sarah bent down without breaking her stance and retrieved the torn notebook page from the ground. It had a fresh smear of asphalt across the corner where Emma had drawn her mom's seal trident. Sarah brushed it off carefully with her thumb, then walked it back to her daughter. Kneeling beside her, she held it out. Is this the one you drew last week? Emma nodded slowly, her eyes wide. Sarah gave her a small, quiet smile. I love this one. Then she stood again. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't issue consequences. She didn't threaten. She just looked around the circle at students, at parents, at teachers, at every adult who had allowed humiliation to pass for discipline and let truth be. Laughed off like a fairy tale. And then she said, only one thing. Now that we're clear, does anyone else have something to say to my daughter? Silence. Not one word. Even Hall, red-faced and swaying, had no answer. Sarah nodded once as if that silence was all the acknowledgement she needed. Then she turned back to Emma, scooped up her backpack, and began placing the scattered contents inside, quietly, one by one. There was no more shouting, no more jokes, no more sneering, only the sound of asphalt under shoes and the fragile edge of a realization they couldn't take back. The side doors to the school flung open a few moments later. Vice Principal Mackin emerged, red-faced and breathless, gripping a walkie-talkie like it could explain why he hadn't been there 5 minutes earlier. What's going on out here? He asked, eyes darting from Sarah to the stunned students to Staff Sergeant Hall still leaning against a car. We heard shouting. Someone said a parent assaulted. Sarah stood calmly beside Emma, one arm resting lightly on her daughter's shoulder. Her voice was steady, professional. I'll give you the facts, sir. My daughter was cornered, mocked, physically shoved, had her personal property damaged, and was filmed without consent, all while multiple adults refused to intervene. McCung blinked. That's a serious claim. It isn't a claim. It's what happened. There are witnesses. She glanced around. A pause. Then slowly one student raised a hand. A quiet 8th grader named Marcus, usually invisible. I saw it, he said. Ethan kicked her notebook. They were laughing before she showed up. Another student, one of Jaden's classmates, stepped forward. They dumped her backpack. I saw that too. McCung looked to Ethan, who had suddenly discovered the sidewalk beneath his feet was fascinating. Is that true, Ethan? Ethan didn't answer, but his phone screen was still on. Recording paused, camera app open. Sarah held out her hand. Phone. Ethan hesitated. McCung cleared his throat. Give it to her. Ethan placed the phone in Sarah's palm like it was radioactive. She tapped twice, delete, confirm, then handed it back without a word. Behind them, Staff Sergeant Hall let out a groan of frustration. This is insane. We're just disciplining a kid who lied. McCung cut him off. I think you've said enough, Sergeant. Sarah's eyes locked with Max. If the school had handled it when the first video circulated, this wouldn't have escalated. Instead, my daughter was made a punchline. McCann's shoulders dropped. We'll open a full investigation. I'll speak with all involved. Detentions, possibly suspensions, phones confiscated, formal apologies. Sarah nodded. Handle it properly. That's all I ask. Security staff arrived then, late, but eager to look involved. Mackin directed them to escort the remaining adults and students inside to begin processing statements. The parking lot, once full of jeers and snickers, now held a strange quiet, the kind of hush that settles after a storm. But before 4. The cleanup starts. Sarah turned to Emma. You okay to stand? Emma nodded, and for the first time all day she wasn't looking at the ground. Just as the vice principal disappeared back into the building and the security team began shuffling people toward the office, the parking lot heard it. 3 black SUVs, silent, smooth, and moving with too much coordination to be random, turned into the far lane of the pickup circle. They weren't blaring music. They weren't speeding. They didn't have tinted vanity plates or oversized rims, but everyone noticed them anyway because something about the way they moved, like gears locking into place, said they weren't here by coincidence. The first SUV eased to a stop behind Sarah's vehicle. The second pulled parallel to the far sidewalk. The third remained by the lot entrance, angled like a silent perimeter. From the lead car a man stepped out, civilian clothes, close-cropped hair, scarred just below his collarbone. His eyes scanned like he'd been briefed mid-ride. He wasn't armed. He didn't need to be. Behind him, 2 more operators emerged. A woman in a gray crew neck sweatshirt and a bearded man holding a black duff. They moved without flair. No one said a word. Sarah didn't turn to face them. She just nodded once. They nodded back. To any outsider it looked like nothing, but to the group of students still lingering by the school steps, jaws slack, phones forgotten in their pockets, it looked like a tactical unit had just descended on the school lot. One of the SEALs approached Emma. He crouched slightly, voice gentle. You okay, kid? Emma hesitated, unsure how to answer. She nodded. The female operator bent to retrieve a pencil that had rolled under a nearby car. She handed it to Emma with a smile and said, your mom says you draw. That true? Emma nodded again, tighter this time. The woman opened the folder she'd carried and tucked the torn drawing inside, flat, clean, like it was a document that mattered to every student watching. The message was clear. This wasn't some made-up lie. This wasn't exaggeration. These people were real, and they moved like no one else in their world. From behind the school's front doors, Madison pressed her face to the glass. She whispered she wasn't lying. Inside the office, even Vice Principal McKen peeked through the blinds and muttered something under his breath that sounded like Jesus. Emma stood now, not just upright, but anchored. She wasn't hiding her face. She wasn't backing away. She stood next to her mom, flanked on either side by people who didn't need to say a word to be understood. And for the first time since lunch, no one questioned her truth. They only tried to figure out how they'd gotten it so wrong. The sun had dipped below the treetops by the time Oakwood's lot cleared out. Most students were long gone, swept up by parents with no idea what had just unfolded. A few faculty stood awkwardly near the front doors, murmuring like weather reporters after a storm. Sarah led Emma toward their SUV. No hand-holding, no rush steps, just shoulder to shoulder, moving together. As they passed the last row of cars, they walked by Staff Sergeant Hall, who stood frozen at the edge of the sidewalk. His posture no longer carried rank. His arms were folded, but not in confidence, only to hold in what dignity remained. He didn't speak. He didn't make eye contact. He simply nodded once, low, slow, like someone realizing they'd just spent an entire day being certain about the wrong thing. Sarah didn't return the nod. She simply opened the passenger door and waited for Emma to climb in. Then she circled to the driver's side, slid in, and closed the door behind her. The engine turned over with a soft hum. The SUV's dashboard lights blinked to life. Neither of them said anything. Right away, outside, one of Sarah's team members gave a subtle wave before stepping back into the lead SUV. Within seconds, all 3 vehicles pulled out like clockwork, clean, unhurried, and gone. Emma sat with her drawing folded neatly in her lap, now restored and smooth, the crease barely visible. After a few moments, she spoke. Did I make everything worse? Sarah kept her eyes on the road as she pulled onto the main street. No, but you told the truth. They didn't know how to hear it. That's not your fault. Emma stared out the window, watching the school disappear behind them. Her voice was softer now. They really didn't believe me. They did today. That hung in the air a moment. Then Emma looked over at her mom. You didn't yell at them. Sarah gave a half smile. Didn't need to. The traffic light ahead blinked red. She tapped the brake, glanced toward her daughter. Next time someone questions who you are or who raised you, don't argue. Emma blinked. Why not? Sarah's answer came without hesitation. Because if they're lucky, they'll find. The light turned green. They rolled forward in silence, and behind them, still echoing in the bones of the school, was a lesson no one would forget. What would you do if adults mocked your child for telling the truth? Do you think the school handled the situation well, or did the SEAL mother have to step in? Drop your answers in the comments below. I read every single one, and if the story reminded you what real discipline and silence look like, smash that like button, subscribe, and tap the bell icon. Then share this video with someone who still thinks Navy SEAL is just a title. Your next mission is already on screen. Go watch it now, and I'll see you tomorrow, same place.